you guys can have out of this, because these are some of the potential solutions. I don't want to get into too much detail on this, because I think it kind of goes away from the whole Big Bang thing. But do you want to touch on this real quick, since you wrote this, Landon, and then maybe Dr. Kroon can weigh in on it a little bit, and then Athena?
Oh, okay. So one of the solutions is to say that essentially inflation stretched out space-time to be flat, right? That you might have had a different geometry in the pre-inflation universe, but the inflation, the rapid, doubling in sizes over a very, very short period of time of space, stretch things out to become flat, or at least close to as flat as we can observe today. There is a different theory, Einstein, that is possible to be invoked, which is sort of Einstein-Cartan theory, that talks about essentially that the theory it removes the constraint of symmetry of what's called the torsion. Basically, that torsion tensor becomes a dynamic variable. So you can get interesting stuff about the fact that it gives correct data for conservation laws for the total angular minimum, let's say, in of matter in presence of gravity, but it's assuming something called that you have these sort of things called Dirac spinors that are obeying these nonlinear Dirac equations. They're trying to come up with a way that is an alternate to how the universe could become flat. Einstein-Cartan theory would assume that the universe will have rapid expansion followed by a contraction and a balance. And that's something that's troubling that particular theory, because it appears now that we're in an inflation-only period. But what to say is that there are two possible solutions. One is during inflation, space got stretched out to where again, right angles are 90 degrees. The geometry is regular in the type of grids you typically see in graph paper, or that there's a alternate theory that revolving around torsion tensors and nonlinear Dirac equations that could also explain it without inflation. However,
all right,
if inflation is fixing, it seems to be favored in fixing the monopole problem, and it seems to be favored in terms of homogeneity problem. One might also see that inflation could also fix the correctness problem. That's one of the reasons why Einstein-Cartan has not been ruled out, but it certainly is not favored because inflation is fixing the other two Big Bang problems so well.
All right, Dr. Kroon, you want to kind of add anything to that? Because probably most of this will go over most people's head. I think the main point is the anthropic principle, but which I can explain, obviously, that if it weren't one, we wouldn't be here. The anthropic principle is that the universe is such that we are here to observe it. If we are creatures that are allowed to observe the universe in a way such that we exist. I mean, if we didn't exist, we couldn't observe the universe. So, but how would you kind of resolve this flatness problem using the Einstein-Cartan theory in a nutshell? I don't want to get too deep in it.
Well, yeah, and in lieu of not repeating the very elegant way that Landon described it and all the stuff we have on the slide, I would just add something that I've always found to be kind of interesting, or at least noteworthy, which is that if you consider, if you think about the Big Bang from the lens of sort of like the quantum foam and the uncertainty principle, and you think about how the universe, just like anything else in the universe right now, can sort of pop into existence from nothing, borrow energy from nothingness, so long is it pops out of existence in less than that delta t, where delta t is less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to h bar, over delta E, whatever that uncertainty is, the uncertainty principle with the canonical variables energy and time. And so what's kind of neat is if you realize that once, let's call it a candidate universe, has popped into existence and at a quantum scale, and it's still more or less a singularity. If there were a force that inflated it so fast that it became macroscopic before that delta t sort of expired and it was sort of required to pop out of existence, then it could sort of, quote, like grab hold of reality and become a real quantum universe that is nascent and ever expanding and becoming even more macroscopic, if you will. So
basically, it's a violation of uncertainty principle, though. I mean, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle would be a relationship between position of a particle and its momentum, right? And you're saying there's an uncertainty principle with relationship to energy and time, and that a violation of that would cause
I would say a back door. Let's say just same thing with like Hawking radiation. Like those particles are supposed to pop back out of existence, but something else that was unrelated to the principles that governed the initial appearance of these entities from nothingness caused it to go at a right angle to that originating principle, that original paradigm. And so the inflation is definitely something that, even though there's all these ways to discuss it and study it, I would almost consider a placeholder word for something that we know happened or happens, sort of like a different phenomenon, like a dark energy, which is likely unrelated completely to it, but like I said, sort of a placeholder word for phenomenon that we infer out of necessity to have happened and can study some of its consequences, even in an indirect sense in the universe today, making it much more legitimate than a simple hypothetical, hypothesis, if you will, more of a model that works for what we see right now. And if you got something better, let us know, sort of a thing,
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes sense that there's maybe a mechanism that allows for that. I mean, I think the analogy makes sense to me that people may not know, but like Hawking radiation is, if you have a boundary condition on the black hole and you have a virtual photon pair produced, there is a situation, depending on what orientation that they have to the boundary, that one photon can actually go into the black hole and the other one gets imparted to become real. They're not just virtual photons. There are real particles that come out of that. And then you have a boiling away of a black hole. That's why small black holes are going to boil away really fast, but larger black holes not so much. But we can actually detect this radiation. We know that it exists, and we know the mechanism behind it now. So you're saying that you think there might be a mechanism.
It's a curvature issue, right? The small black holes have high.
That's to do with the surface area of the black hole, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
This actually ties in really well with the no boundary proposal. Just to jump in really quick, what Dr. Kroon said,
please.
And that's awesome. And I know we're leading into that in a couple slides, but that's just really, really interesting to think about, because also what Landon was saying, and I never thought of it this way before. He said that we're kind of in a stage right now that is sort of like an inflation period because we are expanding. So right now, does it mean that this ties into then that we may potentially end up resulting in a big crunch, where if we actually formed out of existence, then we can fall out of existence just as quickly? And this also, again, would tie right into what Dr. Kroon was saying about the no boundary proposal, which was taking quantum mechanics, and Stephen Hawking applied it directly to black holes and started measuring, as you said, can actually measure Hawking radiation, that when a particle enters the black hole, part of it's radiated back out into the universe, where exactly it will boil out of existence. And so if this is possible, where you can take the mathematics of quantum mechanics and apply that into the macro scale and the cosmos, then does that mean that those two can actually go hand in hand? Because the homogeneity problem, well, not problem, but the observation of the universe being homogeneous and seeing that physics applies to all the universe, physics changes when it comes to the quantum scale. So if you use the physics from the quantum scale and the way that quantum particles work and apply that to massive, into atoms and then the mass scale of the universe, then does that mean that what we may observe happening to particles on the quantum scale actually be happening in the macro scale, meaning multiverse, meaning, a superposition of particles? Does it mean that we're existing here and also somewhere else? But that'll tie into quantum physics we can get into another time. But I just thought that was interesting that he was bringing that up about the different principles from the no boundary proposal principle itself. So I just wanted to chime in about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant lead. That's where people on the outside. This is why we're talking about each one of these topics. She just literally just did my presentation in a nutshell. That's brilliant because these are why these are. No, it's great because people might be going, well, what does this have to do with the topic? There's a correlation here. There's a reason why I picked these particular things to talk about to try to discuss this topic, and I think that you did a brilliant way of pulling that all together. So, there's
several things also to understand. When you're talking about cosmic inflation, we're talking about the typical model says that an epoch that began lasted somewhere around 10 to the minus 36 seconds, a really tiny bit of time, and that the Big Bang hilarious that the notion that in the inflation where the universe began to rapidly expand, that rapid expansion, the extreme rate of expansion slowed down, and today continues at a less expansion rate. So one of the things that most models say inflation kicked off shortly after the Big Bang and had a rapid period of time, and that slowed way down for some reason today, where we have a less rapid rate. It used to be that we said inflation turned off, and because we didn't know that our universe was still expanding or accelerating. But now with observational data, we know better. I want to be back to why do we bring up this Einstein-Cartian theory? One of the things that the Einstein-Cartian theory does is it averts the need for a Big Bang singularity. Instead, it replaces it with a bounce that the universe had sort of a minimum scale factor, perhaps at the Planck level, and that what Einstein-Cartian theory might favor is a universe that is cyclic, where it expands, stops, contracts, and bounces off itself. And so the Big Bang was the last bounce, where it didn't reach singularity, it didn't reach an infinite density. There was a minimum scale that the universe bounced off of.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because we that kind of goes into the whole time element that we're going to be getting into, the big bounce over the Big Bang. But the Big Bang is just part of the big bounce, right? I mean, the Big Bang is not exclusionary.
Remember
big
that,
bounce, right?
That the rapid expansion immediately after the bounce explains why the present universe appears to be spatially flat, homogeneous, and isotropic, right? But the question is, did it come from a singularity, or did it come from a minimum scale?
Gotcha.
And that would so this is an alternate way to explain what? The flatness, right? This doesn't say that Einstein-Cartian theory disagrees with inflation. It may be that inflation is that if the Einstein-Cartian, I think it's Shima-Kibble theory of gravity is reasonable, and that we have a minimum scale, that they don't have singularities, then you can get a flat universe without the need for a singularity at the beginning. Inflation can still happen. It doesn't mean that inflation didn't happen. It just means there's an alternate way that you could get a flat universe, or apparently flat universe.
We got to pick up the pace a little bit here. We're over an hour right now.
Sorry,
Athena, do you want to? That's okay. I know you can go on forever. Did you want to add anything? We can go to the next slide, Athena.
I'm good.
Okay, next slide. She's like, I'm not following that. I wouldn't either. I mean, Landon Landon could pretty. I've seen him do it actually. 8 hours long, just talking about science